Sunrise Over the Canyon by Evelyn Merrick. Montana Territory, 1875. The morning dew still clung to the tall grasses as Amelia Thornton guided her bay mare along the narrow trail toward Willow Creek. 6 months had passed since she'd left Philadelphia behind. 6 months since she'd buried her husband alongside their infant son, victims of the fever that had swept through the city like wildfire. At 23, she found herself both widow and owner of a modest cattle ranch left to her by an uncle she barely remembered. The journey west had been grueling, filled with moments when she questioned her decision. Yet as the sun broke over the distant canyon, painting the sky in hues of pink and amber, she felt a tentative peace settle over her. This wild, untamed country held a beauty that called to something deep within her soul. Amelia pulled her horse to a stop at the crest of a hill, taking in the sprawling valley below. Despite her uncle's meticulous documentation, nothing had prepared her for the vastness of the property. 500 acres of grazing land nestled between rocky outcroppings and stands of pine. In the distance, she could make out the small herd of cattle, smaller than it should have been, according to Sheriff Mills. "Someone's been helping themselves to your livestock, Miss Thornton," he'd informed her upon her arrival in town. "Been happening for a spell now, started before your uncle passed." The thought of cattle rustlers sent a shiver down her spine, but Amelia refused to be intimidated. She'd hired 2 hands to help with the ranch, brothers named Tom and Samuel Walker, but they couldn't patrol the entire property day and night. As she turned to continue toward town, movement in the distance caught her eye. A rider approached from the west, his form silhouetted against the morning light. Instinctively, Amelia's hand moved to the small revolver tucked in her saddlebag. Uncle Henry had insisted every woman should know how to shoot, a skill that had scandalized her Philadelphia friends, but one she now appreciated. The rider slowed as he spotted her, changing course to intercept her path. As he drew closer, she could make out a lean, tall frame atop a magnificent black stallion. His face was partially obscured by the brim of his hat, but she could see strong features bronzed by the sun. "Morning, miss," he called, his voice a deep rumble that matched his imposing presence. He kept a respectful distance, seeming to sense her wariness. "Didn't mean to startle you." "Good morning," she replied, keeping her tone even despite the rapid beating of her pulse. "You're riding Thornton's land?" A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Reckon I am. You must be Henry's niece." He removed his hat, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. "Jackson Wade. I own the neighboring property to the north." The name was familiar. Uncle Henry had mentioned the Wade Ranch in his letters. "Mr. Wade," she acknowledged with a slight nod. "I'm Amelia Thornton." "I figured as much. Word travels fast in these parts." His eyes, a striking shade of blue that contrasted with his sun-darkened skin, assessed her with undisguised curiosity. "You're a long way from Philadelphia." "This is my home now," she stated simply, lifting her chin. She wouldn't allow herself to be intimidated, not by this man or the challenges that lay ahead. Something that might have been respect flickered in his expression. "It's rough country for a woman alone." "I'm not alone. I have the Walker brothers." Jackson Wade's expression darkened momentarily. "Tom and Samuel are good men, but they can't be everywhere at once. You've lost cattle." Sheriff Mills informed me. "It's not just your ranch. Several of us have been hit." He paused, seeming to consider his next words carefully. "A group of us are meeting at Willow Creek tonight to discuss forming a protective association. You should join us." Amelia hesitated. She'd planned to keep to herself, at least until she'd found her footing in this new world. "I don't know." "Miss Thornton," he said, his voice softening slightly, "I knew your uncle. He was a good man, fair and honest. These rustlers, they prey on those they perceive as weak. A new owner, a woman at that, they'll test you." Pride flared within her. "I'm stronger than I look, Mr. Wade." The smile that spread across his face transformed his features, revealing a handsomeness that caught her off guard. "I don't doubt that for a moment, Miss Thornton. But even the strongest among us need allies sometimes." Their eyes held for a moment too long, and Amelia felt a curious warmth spread through her chest. She broke the gaze first, adjusting her riding gloves. "Perhaps I will attend then." "What time?" 7 o'clock at McGregor's Saloon. "Don't worry, they've got a private room in the back." "Quite respectable." His eyes twinkled with amusement, as if he'd read her thoughts about the propriety of a woman entering a saloon. "I'll be there," she promised, gathering her reins. "Good day, Mr. Wade." "Until tonight, Miss Thornton." He settled his hat back on his head with a fluid motion and clicked to his horse, turning back toward the north. Amelia watched him ride away, his straight back and confident posture marking him as a man comfortable in his own skin. Only when he disappeared over the ridge did she continue her journey to town, her thoughts inexplicably filled with the image of blue eyes against tanned skin. McGregor's saloon was unlike any establishment Amelia had ever entered. The main room bustled with activity, men drinking and playing cards, the tinny notes of a piano competing with raucous laughter. She ignored the curious stares as she made her way to the bar, where a burly man with an impressive mustache regarded her with raised eyebrows. "I'm here for the meeting," she stated, keeping her voice firm. "The ranchers' meeting." Recognition dawned in his eyes. "Miss Thornton." "In the back." He gestured toward a door at the rear of the saloon. "They're waiting." Steeling herself, Amelia crossed the room with measured steps, back straight, eyes forward. She'd changed into one of her better dresses for the occasion, a deep blue that complemented her chestnut hair, which she'd arranged in a simple but elegant knot at the nape of her neck. When she entered the back room, conversation halted abruptly. 5 men sat around a large oak table, glasses of amber liquid before them. Jackson Wade rose immediately, the gesture prompting the others to follow suit. "Miss Thornton," he greeted her, pulling out an empty chair. "Gentlemen, this is Henry Thornton's niece and the new owner of the Thornton Ranch." Amelia nodded at the introductions. Charles McGregor, the saloon owner; Frederick Holden, whose large sheep ranch bordered her property to the east; Daniel Porter, who ran the general store but also owned a small cattle operation; and Michael Sullivan, whose Irish brogue remained strong despite 20 years in the territory. "We were just discussing the pattern of the thefts," Jackson explained as she took her seat. "They're organized, targeting specific ranches at specific times." "Which suggests they're familiar with our operations?" Frederick Holden added, his gray beard quivering with indignation. "Could be someone local?" "Or someone with local information," Daniel Porter countered. "We get drifters through town regular enough." Amelia listened carefully as they debated possibilities. The rustlers had stolen nearly 30 head from her uncle's ranch over the past year, a significant loss for an operation her size. "What do you suggest we do?" she asked during a lull in the conversation. "Hire more hands? Mount patrols?" Michael Sullivan chuckled, though not unkindly. "Begging your pardon, Miss Thornton, but none of us can afford to hire enough men to patrol our entire properties." "We need to catch them in the act," Jackson said, his expression thoughtful. "Set a trap." "Using what as bait?" Frederick demanded. "None of us can afford to lose more cattle." An idea formed in Amelia's mind. What if we use my herd?" All eyes turned to her in surprise. "My ranch seems to be a favorite target, according to Sheriff Mills. What if we make it known that I'll be moving a small group of cattle to the south pasture next week? The rustlers might see me as an easy mark." Jackson's brow furrowed. "It's too dangerous. If they realize it's a trap." "We'd be prepared," she insisted. "Hidden and waiting. Between all of us and our most trusted hands, we should have enough men to catch them." Charles McGregor stroked his mustache thoughtfully. "The lass has a point. They'd never suspect a trap set by a city woman new to the territory." "It's too risky," Jackson repeated, his blue eyes intense as they locked with hers. "These men are dangerous, Miss Thornton." Amelia sat straighter. "Mr. Wade, I've crossed half a continent alone after burying my family. I'm quite familiar with risk." The words came out sharper than she'd intended, laden with the grief she usually kept carefully contained. A heavy silence fell over the table. Jackson's expression softened with something that looked dangerously like compassion, and Amelia had to look away. "I think it's a fine plan," Daniel Porter finally said. "If the lady is willing, we should consider it." By the end of the evening, they had formed the outline of a strategy. Amelia would move 20 head to her southern pasture on Wednesday, making sure word spread through town. The ranchers and their most trusted hands would position themselves strategically around the area on Wednesday and Thursday nights, when the rustlers were most likely to strike. As the meeting broke up, Jackson hung back, waiting until the others had filed out before approaching her. "I admire your courage, Miss Thornton," he said quietly. "But I hope you understand you won't be participating in the actual trap. It's no place for a woman," she finished, arching an eyebrow. He had the grace to look slightly chagrined. For the person the rustlers will be watching most closely. If they see you still on the property after dark, they'll be suspicious." Amelia considered this. "You're right," she conceded. "But I insist on being kept informed every step of the way." "Of course." He hesitated, then asked, "May I escort you home? It's dark, and—" "Thank you, but I have my horse." She gathered her shawl around her shoulders. "The Walker brothers will be waiting for my return." Jackson nodded, though she could see he was reluctant to let her ride alone. "Then I'll bid you good night, Miss Thornton." As Amelia rode home beneath a canopy of stars, she replayed the meeting in her mind. The plan was risky, yes, but necessary. This land was her future now, her only chance at building a new life from the ashes of her old one. She would not let thieves take it from her piece by piece. And if thoughts of a certain blue-eyed rancher kept intruding on her strategic planning, well, she would simply have to be more disciplined with her mind. The following days passed in a flurry of preparation. Amelia worked alongside Tom and Samuel Walker to select the cattle for the move, carefully choosing animals that would be visible from a distance but not her best breeding stock. Word of the planned move spread through town exactly as intended, thanks to a few well-placed comments at the general store. On Tuesday evening, as Amelia supervised the repair of a section of fencing near the main house, the sound of approaching hoofbeats drew her attention. Jackson Wade rode toward her, leading a second horse, a sturdy-looking dun mare. "Evening, Miss Thornton," he called, dismounting in one fluid motion. Up close, she could see the fatigue lining his face, though his movements remained energetic. "Mr. Wade," she acknowledged, wiping her hands on her apron. She'd taken to wearing practical clothing while working around the ranch, sturdy skirts with blouses and boots, her hair braided and pinned up beneath a wide-brimmed hat. "What brings you here?" He gestured to the dun mare. "I thought you might want to use Daisy here tomorrow. She's steady and knows cattle work better than most hands." Amelia approached the horse, running a hand down her strong neck. The mare nickered softly, nudging Amelia's shoulder. "She's beautiful," she murmured. "But I couldn't possibly." "Consider it a loan," Jackson insisted. "For the operation. That bay of yours is fine for riding, but not experienced with herding." Their eyes met over the mare's back, and Amelia felt that now familiar flutter in her chest. Over the past days she'd found herself thinking of him at odd moments, wondering about his story, how he'd come to Montana, whether he too had known loss. "Thank you," she said simply. "Would you like to come in for coffee? Samuel's wife made apple cake this morning." A genuine smile spread across his face. "I'd like that very much, Miss Thornton." Inside the modest ranch house, Amelia busied herself with the coffee pot, while Jackson removed his hat and gloves, taking in the changes she'd made to the main room. Her uncle's sparse furnishings had been supplemented with colorful cushions and throws she'd brought from Philadelphia, along with several books that now lined a previously empty shelf. "You've made it your own," he observed as she placed a cup before him. "Henry would be pleased." "Did you know him well?" she asked, cutting generous slices of cake. Jackson nodded, accepting the plate she offered. "He helped me when I first came here 10 years ago. Taught me about ranching, loaned me my first breeding bull." His expression grew distant with memory. "I was pretty green, had some notions about the West that didn't quite match reality." "Where were you from originally?" "Boston, actually," he chuckled at her expression. "Not what you expected, I gather." "Not entirely," she admitted. "You seem so at home here." "It gets in your blood," he said, his voice low. "This land. The freedom of it, the challenges." He took a sip of coffee, regarding her over the rim. "What about you, Miss Thornton? Do you plan to stay, or is this a temporary arrangement until you can sell?" The question caught her off guard, though she'd asked herself the same thing many times. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "At first I came because I had nowhere else to go. But now," she glanced out the window at the sweeping landscape bathed in late afternoon light. "There's something about this place. It's nothing like Philadelphia, but perhaps that's what I need." Jackson seemed to understand the weight behind her words. "Loss changes us," he said quietly. "Makes us seek new horizons." Amelia looked at him sharply. "You sound as though you speak from experience." A shadow crossed his face. "My wife died in childbirth 7 years ago, along with our son." The words were simple, unadorned, yet Amelia felt their impact like a physical blow. "I'm sorry," she whispered, the shared grief creating an unexpected bridge between them. He acknowledged her sympathy with a slight nod. "Life continues, Miss Thornton. We endure." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the unspoken understanding more powerful than any words could have been. Finally, Jackson set down his empty cup. "I should go. We have a long day ahead of us tomorrow." At the door, he turned back, his expression serious. "Be careful tomorrow. If anything seems wrong, anything at all, don't go through with the move. Your safety is more important than catching rustlers." The concern in his voice warmed her. "I'll be careful," she promised. After he'd gone, Amelia stood on the porch watching him ride away, aware of a strange sense of anticipation mingled with fear, and not entirely related to the trap they were about to spring. The cattle move went exactly as planned. By late afternoon on Wednesday, 20 head grazed peacefully in the south pasture, visible from the main trail but far enough from the ranch house to make them an appealing target. Amelia made a show of instructing the Walker brothers about their care, then rode back to the main house well before sunset. As darkness fell, Jackson and 6 other men, including Frederick Holden and Michael Sullivan, took up positions around the pasture, hidden among rocks and trees. They'd agreed to maintain their vigil for 2 nights if necessary. Amelia paced the floor of her ranch house, unable to settle. The Walker brothers had insisted one of them stay with her, and Samuel sat quietly at the kitchen table cleaning his rifle, his presence both reassuring and a reminder of the danger. "They're good men," Samuel commented, noting her restlessness. "Mr. Wade knows what he's doing. Used to be a lawman back east, from what I hear." Amelia paused in her pacing. "A lawman. He never mentioned that." Samuel shrugged. "Not my place to tell his story, ma'am, but he's got experience with situations like this. If anyone can catch these rustlers without bloodshed, it's him." The hours crept by with excruciating slowness. Midnight came and went with no word. Amelia had just decided to try to get some sleep when the sound of rapidly approaching horses sent her hurrying to the window. Jackson dismounted before his horse had fully stopped, taking the porch steps 2 at a time. His expression was grim as Samuel let him in. "What happened?" Amelia demanded, her heart racing at the sight of a dark stain on his sleeve. "You're hurt." "It's nothing," he dismissed, though he winced when she reached for his arm. "Just a graze. We caught them, 3 men trying to drive off the cattle. They fired when we identified ourselves." "Did you?" She couldn't finish the question. "No one was killed," he assured her. 2 of them are in custody. The 3rd got away, but Frederick recognized him, Josh Mercer, who used to work for him. Amelia sagged with relief. "Sit down, let me look at that arm." To her surprise, he complied without argument, allowing her to help him remove his jacket. The bullet had torn through his shirt sleeve, leaving a bloody furrow along his upper arm. "Samuel, would you bring me hot water and the medical kit?" she requested, already rolling up her sleeves. "And perhaps some whiskey." "Yes, miss." The ranch hand hurried to comply, seeming relieved to have a task. Jackson watched as Amelia efficiently gathered clean cloths. "You've done this before," he observed. "My husband was a doctor," she explained, focusing on her preparations rather than meeting his eyes. "I assisted him sometimes." She worked in silence, cleaning the wound with gentle but thorough movements. Jackson didn't flinch, though she knew it must hurt. When she finally tied off the bandage and stepped back, their eyes met, and the intensity in his gaze sent a flutter through her stomach. "Thank you," he said simply. "It's the least I could do. You were injured helping me." "Helping all of us," he corrected. The rustlers had taken cattle from every ranch in the valley. With Mercer's identity known, Sheriff Mills should be able to track down the rest of their operation. Amelia nodded, suddenly aware of how close they were standing, of the lateness of the hour, of Samuel's tactful absence in the kitchen. "You should rest," she said, stepping back slightly. "You're welcome to use the spare room." Jackson hesitated, then shook his head. "I should get back. The others will be waiting for news." She walked him to the door, where he paused, turning to face her. In the soft lamplight, the angles of his face seemed softer, his eyes warmer. "Miss Thornton, Amelia," he said, her given name sounding like a caress in his deep voice. "Would you permit me to call on you? Properly, I mean. Not just for ranch business." The question sent a jolt of pleasure through her. "I would like that," she answered, surprised by the steadiness of her voice despite her racing pulse. His smile transformed his face, erasing the fatigue and tension of the night. "Sunday, then. I could take you on a proper tour of the area." Sunday would be perfect. After he'd gone, Amelia stood on the porch watching the stars, a sense of possibility unfurling within her that she hadn't felt since before tragedy had altered her life's course. The Montana Territory was not the future she had envisioned for herself, but standing beneath its vast night sky, she could begin to imagine building something new from the ruins of her old life. And perhaps, just perhaps, she wouldn't be building it alone. Sunday dawned clear and bright, the kind of pristine September day that seemed to stretch the boundaries of perfection. Amelia rose early, taking extra care with her appearance. She chose a riding outfit of deep green that complemented her eyes, arranging her hair in a style that was both practical and flattering. By 10 o'clock, she was waiting on the porch, pretending to read but actually watching the trail from the north. When Jackson appeared on his black stallion, leading Daisy the dun mare, Amelia's pulse quickened. He dressed with care as well, she noted, clean dark trousers, a crisp white shirt, and a vest that emphasized his broad shoulders. His customary hat was in place, but his face was freshly shaved, making him look younger, less weathered. "Good morning," he called, his smile warming his eyes as he approached. "You look lovely." Amelia felt a blush rise to her cheeks at the simple compliment. "Thank you. You're looking quite well yourself, Mr. Wade." "Jackson," he corrected, dismounting to help her onto Daisy. "I think we're past formalities, don't you?" His hands at her waist were strong and sure as he lifted her into the saddle, lingering perhaps a moment longer than strictly necessary. Amelia found herself strangely breathless. "Jackson, then," she agreed, settling her skirts. "Where are we headed today?" He swung up onto his own horse with easy grace. "I thought I'd show you my favorite spot on your property, if you don't mind. Your uncle used to call it the Overlook." They rode at a comfortable pace, side by side where the trail allowed it. Jackson pointed out landmarks and shared stories of the area's history, including tales of the indigenous peoples who had first named the mountains and rivers. Amelia found herself laughing at his dry humor and impressed by his knowledge. As they climbed a gently sloping hill, the trail narrowed, forcing them to ride single file. Emerging at the top, Amelia gasped at the vista spread before them. From this elevation she could see for miles her entire ranch and beyond, the distant town of Willow Creek, and the magnificent mountains that form the territory's backbone. "It's breathtaking," she murmured, dismounting to better appreciate the view. Jackson joined her, standing close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. "Henry used to come up here to think," he said. "Said a man could see his whole world from this spot, put things in perspective." "I can understand why." She turned to face him, struck by the expression in his eyes as he gazed not at the view but at her. "Thank you for bringing me here." They spread a blanket on a flat area of ground, and Jackson produced a picnic lunch that surpassed anything Amelia had expected: fried chicken, biscuits, cherry preserves, and even a bottle of wine. Samuel's wife helped, he admitted with a sheepish grin when she expressed her amazement. "I'm afraid my cooking skills are limited to camp coffee and beans." As they ate, the conversation flowed easily between them. Amelia found herself sharing stories of her life in Philadelphia, her childhood, her marriage to David, the devastating fever that had claimed him and their infant son. Jackson listened without interruption, his face reflecting compassion without pity. In turn, he told her about his past, his youth in Boston, his time as a police detective, and the restlessness that had driven him west after losing his wife and child. "I came looking for oblivion," he confessed, his voice low. "Thought I might find it in wilderness and hard work. What I found instead was a different kind of peace," Amelia finished when he trailed off. He met her eyes, surprise and understanding in his gaze. "Yes, exactly." Not forgetting but continuing. The sun had begun its westward descent when they finally packed up the remains of their lunch. As Amelia folded the blanket, Jackson stepped closer, gently taking it from her hands and setting it aside. "Amelia," he said, his voice deeper than usual, "I've been alone a long time. I thought that was what I wanted, what I deserved, even. But since you arrived..." Her breath caught as he reached up to brush a strand of hair from her face, his touch feather light against her cheek. "I never expected to feel this way again," he continued, his eyes holding hers. "To want to share my days with someone, to build something together." The hope and vulnerability in his expression touched something deep within her. Without conscious thought, Amelia reached up to place her hand over his where it rested against her cheek. "I came here seeking refuge," she whispered. "A place to heal. I never imagined I might find." "A new beginning?" he suggested, drawing her gently closer. "Yes." When his lips met hers, Amelia felt a surge of emotion so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. The kiss was gentle at first, a question more than a demand, but as she responded, it deepened into something that spoke of shared loneliness, mutual understanding, and the tentative hope of a future neither had dared imagine. When they finally parted, Jackson rested his forehead against hers, his breathing uneven. "I should apologize," he murmured. "That was presumptuous of me." Amelia smiled, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "No apology necessary, Mr. Wade. I believe I was a willing participant." His answering chuckle was warm against her skin. "Nevertheless, I should do things properly." He stepped back slightly, though he kept hold of her hands. "Miss Thornton, would you do me the honor of allowing me to court you? With all the respect and consideration you deserve." The formality of the request, so at odds with the passion of moments before, made her laugh. "I would be delighted, Mr. Wade. Though I warn you, I've become quite independent since coming west." His smile was radiant. "I wouldn't have it any other way. A woman who can face down cattle rustlers and manage a ranch isn't likely to be satisfied with a conventional arrangement." As they rode back to her ranch in the golden light of late afternoon, Amelia felt a sense of rightness she hadn't experienced since before tragedy had upended her life. The Montana Territory would never be Philadelphia, the challenges were greater, the comforts fewer, but as she watched Jackson ride beside her, strong and steady, she knew she had found something more precious than comfort. She had found possibility, a chance to build something meaningful from the broken pieces of her past, and perhaps most unexpected of all, she had found someone who understood the journey, because he had traveled it himself. As they approached the ranch house, the setting sun painted the landscape in hues of rose and amber, transforming the rugged terrain into something magical. Jackson reached across the space between their horses to take her hand, and in that simple gesture, Amelia saw the promise of all the days to come. The West had not been kind to either of them, taking loved ones and testing their resilience. But it had also given them this moment, this connection, this opportunity to begin again. And for now, that was enough.